The hospital corridor was busier than usual that Friday night. Rachel wiped the sweat from her forehead as she rushed through the emergency room, her arms full of fresh linens and medical supplies. She was already 20 minutes behind schedule, and her shift at the diner started in less than an hour. There was no time to waste. Working 2 jobs wasn't easy, but Rachel had learned to manage. Ever since her ex-husband walked out 5 years ago, leaving her pregnant and alone, she'd done whatever it took to provide for her daughter. Little Sophie was now 5 years old, sleeping peacefully at her neighbor's house, completely unaware of how hard her mother worked to keep their small life together. Rachel turned the corner near the trauma bay and collided hard with someone. The supplies in her arms went flying. Bandages rolled across the floor. A box of gloves scattered everywhere. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." Rachel dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the supplies. Her heart pounded. She couldn't afford to mess up. This job was everything. "It's all right. My fault entirely." The voice was deep and calm. Rachel looked up and found herself staring at a man in an expensive suit. Not the kind of suit you see every day. This was the kind that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But what caught her attention wasn't the suit. It was the blood dripping from his hand onto the white hospital floor. "You're bleeding." Rachel forgot about the scattered supplies. Her nurse training kicked in immediately. She stood up and reached for his hand. "Let me see that." The man pulled his hand back slightly. "It's nothing. Just a small cut." That's not a small cut. Rachel could see the gash clearly now. It was deep, running across his palm. "You need stitches. Come with me. I don't have time right now. I need to." "Sir, with all due respect, you're dripping blood all over the hospital floor." "You have time." Rachel's voice was firm but kind. She'd dealt with stubborn patients before. "Please. It'll take 10 minutes. The man looked at her for a moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he nodded. "All right." Rachel led him to an empty treatment room and quickly grabbed a suture kit. As she cleaned the wound, she noticed how expensive everything about him was. The watch on his other wrist could probably pay her rent for a year. His shoes were polished to perfection. Even his cologne smelled expensive. But what struck her most was how he watched her work. Most wealthy people she'd encountered at the hospital treated nurses like they were invisible. This man was different. He studied her face with an intensity that made her slightly uncomfortable. "How did this happen?" Rachel asked, trying to fill the silence as she prepared the needle. "Broken glass door. I was in a hurry and didn't see it properly." "Well, you're lucky. Another inch to the right and you could have hit a major artery." Rachel began stitching carefully. Her hands were steady despite her exhaustion. "This might sting a little." The man didn't even flinch. "You're very good at this." "I've been doing it for 6 years. Rachel focused on her work. "You'd be surprised how many people come in here with hand injuries. Last week, a guy tried to open a can with a knife. That was a mess. I imagine you see a lot here, more than I'd like sometimes." Rachel tied off the last stitch and began wrapping his hand with clean gauze. "But it's honest work. I help people. That matters to me." She worked quickly, expertly winding the bandage around his palm and securing it. When she finished, she stepped back to examine her work. "There, keep it clean and dry. Come back in a week to get the stitches removed. If you see any signs of infection, redness, swelling, pus, come back immediately." The man looked at his bandaged hand, then back at her. "Thank you, really, I appreciate your help." "It's my job." Rachel smiled tiredly. She glanced at the clock on the wall and her heart sank. She was definitely going to be late for the diner now. That meant less money in tips, and she needed every dollar. "What's your name?" the man asked suddenly. Rachel hesitated. Something about the way he asked made her cautious. Rachel Torres." "Thank you, Rachel Torres." He stood up, and she realized how tall he was. "You've been very kind." Before she could respond, the treatment room door opened and 3 men in dark suits walked in. They looked like security guards or bodyguards. One of them spoke urgently. "Sir, we need to leave. The press somehow found out you're here." "The press?" Rachel's eyes widened slightly. Who was this man? "I'm coming." The man turned back to Rachel. "Thank you again. You have no idea what your kindness means." And then he was gone, swept away by the security team, leaving Rachel standing alone in the treatment room with more questions than answers. She quickly cleaned up and rushed to complete her shift. Her supervisor noticed she'd been gone and gave her a warning look but didn't say anything. Rachel couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious man with the injured hand. She'd treated hundreds of patients. Why did this one feel different? By the time she reached the diner, she was 30 minutes late. Tony, the owner, shook his head disapprovingly but didn't send her home. He knew she needed the money. The next 4 hours were a blur of coffee refills, burger orders, and forced smiles for customers who barely looked at her. It was almost 2 in the morning when Rachel finally made it home. She paid Mrs. Chen, her elderly neighbor who watched Sophie at night, and carried her sleeping daughter inside. Sophie's small arms wrapped around her neck, and Rachel felt the familiar ache in her chest. This beautiful little girl deserved so much more than Rachel could give her. She laid Sophie down in their shared bed. Their tiny apartment only had 1 bedroom, and pulled the blanket over her. Sophie's face was peaceful, innocent. Rachel brushed a strand of dark hair from her daughter's forehead and whispered, "I'm doing my best, baby. I promise." Exhausted, Rachel changed into old pajamas and collapsed onto the bed beside her daughter. Her body ached. Her feet hurt. But this was life. This was what being a single mother meant. No breaks, no days off, just constant work and constant worry. As she closed her eyes, she thought briefly about the man from the hospital. She wondered if he'd gotten home safely, if he'd keep the bandage clean like she'd told him. Then she pushed the thought away. He was probably someone important, someone wealthy. Their worlds would never cross again. Rachel had no idea that everything she thought she knew about her life was about to change. She didn't know that the man whose hand she'd bandaged was actually one of the richest and most powerful people in the entire country. She didn't know that he'd been so moved by her simple act of kindness that he'd already decided to find her again. And she definitely didn't know that when she woke up tomorrow morning. 200 black luxury cars would be surrounding her house, and her quiet, difficult, but ordinary life would never be the same again. Rachel's alarm went off at 7 in the morning. She groaned and reached over to silence it, her whole body protesting the movement. 4 hours of sleep wasn't enough, but it was all she ever got these days. She rubbed her eyes and sat up slowly, careful not to wake Sophie, who was still curled up beside her. Through the thin curtains, sunlight streamed into their small bedroom. It seemed brighter than usual. Rachel shuffled to the window to close the curtains more tightly so Sophie could sleep a bit longer. But when she looked outside, her breath caught in her throat. Cars. Dozens and dozens of identical black cars lined every inch of her street. They weren't regular cars either. These were the kind you see in movies, sleek and expensive, with tinted windows so dark you couldn't see inside. Men in black suits stood beside each vehicle, perfectly still, like statues. Rachel's hands started shaking. What was happening? Was this some kind of police raid? Had she done something wrong? Her mind raced through every possibility, each one worse than the last. Her neighbors were already outside. Mrs. Chen stood on her porch in her bathrobe, her phone out, recording everything. The Johnson family from across the street had their entire family on their front lawn, staring. Even grumpy Mr. Peterson, who never talked to anyone, was peering through his fence. Rachel backed away from the window, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands and started to dial 911, but before she could press call, her doorbell rang. The sound made her jump. Sophie stirred in bed but didn't wake up. Rachel stood frozen, unsure what to do. The doorbell rang again, followed by a polite knock. "Miss Torres? My name is Vincent. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Blackwell. May I have a moment of your time?" "Mr. Blackwell?" Rachel's mind went blank. She didn't know anyone named Blackwell. Then suddenly it clicked. The man from the hospital. The one with the injured hand. But why would he send all these cars? Rachel checked that Sophie was still asleep, then slowly walked to the front door. She opened it just a crack, keeping the chain lock on. An older gentleman stood on her doorstep. He was maybe 60 years old, with silver hair perfectly combed back, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car. "Miss Torres, I apologize for the dramatic arrival. Mr. Blackwell wanted to ensure your safety and privacy, though I admit this may have had the opposite effect." The man named Vincent smiled gently. "May I come in for just a moment? I promise this won't take long. I don't understand what's happening." Rachel's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I know this must be confusing. Please, just 5 minutes of your time and I'll explain everything." Rachel looked back at Sophie, still sleeping peacefully. Every instinct told her not to let a stranger into her home. But she was also desperately curious. She unhooked the chain and opened the door wider, though she stayed in the doorway, ready to slam it shut if needed. Vincent reached into his jacket pocket and Rachel tensed, but he only pulled out a cream-colored envelope. The paper looked expensive, with a gold seal pressed into the wax. "Mr. Blackwell asked me to deliver this to you personally." Vincent held out the envelope. "He wanted to thank you for your kindness last night." Rachel took the envelope carefully, as if it might explode. She broke the seal and pulled out a handwritten note on thick paper. The handwriting was neat and precise. "Dear Rachel, thank you for taking care of my hand last night. Your kindness reminded me that good people still exist in this world. Please accept this small token of my gratitude. You mentioned you help people because it matters. You helped me more than you know." Beneath the note was a check. Rachel pulled it out and her knees nearly gave out. $500,000. The numbers swam before her eyes. This couldn't be real. There must be some mistake, Rachel whispered. This is too much." I just bandaged his hand. "That's my job. I can't accept this. Mr. Blackwell anticipated you might say that." Vincent's smile was kind. "He asked me to tell you that he knows the value of genuine kindness. It's rarer than you might think, especially in his world." "Who is he?" Rachel finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind since last night. "You truly don't know?" Vincent looked surprised. "Mr. Blackwell is the CEO of Blackwell Industries. It's one of the largest corporations in the country. He's a very private person, which is why you might not recognize him." Rachel felt dizzy. She'd treated one of the richest men in the country and had no idea. She looked down at the check again. This money could change her entire life. She could quit the diner. She could spend more time with Sophie. She could finally breathe. But something felt wrong about it. She'd learned the hard way that nothing in life came free. Her ex-husband had seemed generous at first too, buying her gifts and making promises. Then he'd used every kind gesture as leverage, as proof that she owed him something. "I appreciate this, I really do, but I can't accept it." Rachel tried to hand the check back. "Please tell Mr. Blackwell thank you, but it's too much." Vincent didn't take the check. "Miss Torres, Mr. Blackwell is not a man who takes no for an answer easily. But he's also not trying to buy anything from you. He simply wants to express his gratitude." He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a business card. "This has his private number. If you change your mind or if you'd simply like to talk, please call. He'd very much like to see you again." "See me again?" Rachel's voice rose slightly. "Why would someone like him want to see someone like me again?" "Perhaps you should ask him yourself." Vincent placed the card on top of the envelope in her hands. "The cars will leave now. Again, my apologies for the disruption to your morning. I hope you have a wonderful day, Miss Torres." He turned and walked back to one of the black cars. Within minutes, all the vehicles started their engines in perfect synchronization. It was like watching a strange ballet. One by one, they pulled away from her street, disappearing as quickly as they'd appeared. Rachel stood in her doorway, clutching the envelope and business card, watching them go. Her neighbors immediately rushed over, all talking at once. "Rachel, what was that about?" Mrs. Chen asked, her eyes wide. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" Mr. Johnson looked concerned. "Did you win the lottery or something?" his wife added. Rachel shook her head, unable to form words. She mumbled something about a mistake and hurried back inside, closing the door behind her. She leaned against it, her legs shaking. Sophie appeared in the bedroom doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, I heard loud noises." "What's happening?" Rachel quickly stuffed the envelope and card into her pocket. "Nothing, sweetie. Just some cars on our street. Come on, let's make breakfast." As she made pancakes for Sophie, Rachel's mind wouldn't stop racing. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. Part of her wanted to tear up the check and forget this ever happened. Another part of her kept thinking about what that money could mean for Sophie's future. But the biggest question nagging at her was the simplest one. Why would a billionaire care about a single mom who'd done nothing special? She'd just bandaged his hand. It was basic first aid. Any nurse would have done the same thing, unless it wasn't about the bandage at all. Rachel flipped a pancake and watched Sophie coloring at their small kitchen table, completely oblivious to how their world had just tilted on its axis. Whatever happened next, Rachel knew one thing for certain. Her quiet, predictable life had just become very, very complicated. Rachel didn't call the number. She kept the business card in her nightstand drawer, hidden under old receipts and forgotten paperwork. The check stayed there too, untouched. Every night before bed, she'd open the drawer and stare at those numbers, but she couldn't bring herself to cash it. 3 days passed. Then a week. Life went back to normal, or at least Rachel tried to make it normal. She worked her shifts at the hospital and the diner. She picked up Sophie from daycare. She paid bills and worried about money like always. But things weren't normal. Strange things started happening. On Monday, Rachel went to pay her electric bill and discovered it had already been paid. The clerk showed her the receipt. Someone had paid not just this month, but the next 6 months too. Anonymous donor, the receipt said. On Wednesday, she received a call from the hospital. Her student loans had been completely paid off. Over $40,000 gone in an instant. When she demanded to know who paid it, they told her the donor wished to remain anonymous. On Friday, Sophie's daycare called her into the office. The director smiled warmly and told Rachel that Sophie had been selected for a special scholarship. Full coverage for the next 3 years. Rachel had never applied for any scholarship. When she pressed for details, the director just said a generous benefactor wanted to help promising families. Rachel knew exactly who was behind it all. Her hands shook with anger as she drove home that night. How dare he? She'd said no. She'd made it clear she didn't want his money. But he was doing it anyway, sneaking around, paying for things without asking. That evening, after putting Sophie to bed, Rachel pulled out the business card. She stared at the number for 10 minutes before finally picking up her phone. Her finger hovered over the screen. This was a bad idea. She should just throw the card away and ignore everything, but she couldn't. She needed to tell him to stop. Rachel dialed the number. It rang twice before someone answered. This is Alexander Blackwell. His voice was the same as she remembered, deep and calm. This is Rachel Torres. She tried to keep her voice steady. The nurse from the hospital. There was a pause. Rachel, I'm glad you called. I'm not calling to chat. I'm calling to tell you to stop. Stop what? You know what? The bills. The loans. The scholarship. All of it. Rachel paced her small living room. I told you I couldn't accept your money. That includes you paying for things behind my back. I'm simply trying to help. I don't need your help. I've been taking care of myself and my daughter just fine for 5 years. I'm sure you have. His tone was gentle, which somehow made her angrier. But why struggle when you don't have to? That money means nothing to me, Rachel. But it could mean everything to you and your daughter. That's exactly the problem. Don't you see that? Rachel stopped pacing. You throw around more money in a week than I'll make in my entire life. To you, it's nothing. But to me, it's everything. And that kind of imbalance, that kind of debt, it never ends well. This isn't about debt. There are no strings attached. There are always strings. Rachel's voice cracked slightly. Maybe not now, maybe not ones you even realize, but eventually there are always strings. I learned that the hard way. The line was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Someone hurt you badly. Rachel didn't answer. She didn't owe him her story. I'm not that person, Rachel. I'm not trying to control you or manipulate you. I just saw someone who works twice as hard as anyone should have to, and I wanted to make things easier. Is that so wrong? Yes, when I didn't ask for it. Rachel sat down on her worn couch. Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I really do, but I can't accept charity from a stranger. Then let's not be strangers. He said it so simply, like it was the most obvious solution in the world. Have coffee with me, 1 hour. Let me explain why this matters to me. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just 1 coffee. If you still want me to stop after that, I will. I promise. Rachel closed her eyes. This was a mistake. Everything about this was a mistake. But curiosity was eating her alive. Why was this billionaire so interested in helping her? What did he really want? 1 coffee, she finally said. But I'm paying for my own drink. She could hear the smile in his voice. Fair enough. They met 2 days later at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. Rachel had picked the place deliberately. It wasn't fancy. It was the kind of place where construction workers grabbed coffee before their shifts and students studied for exams. She wanted him to see her world, not the other way around. Alexander arrived exactly on time, but this time he wasn't wearing an expensive suit. He had on jeans and a simple sweater. He looked more normal, though Rachel noticed the watch on his wrist probably still cost more than her car. They ordered their drinks. Rachel insisted on paying for her own latte like she'd promised, though the barista looked confused when Alexander didn't argue. They sat at a corner table. The silence stretched between them, awkward and heavy. "Your hand," Rachel said finally, nodding at the bandage still visible on his palm. "You kept it clean." He looked down at his hand and smiled. "I followed your instructions exactly. You were right about the stitches. They came out last week." "Good." Rachel wrapped her hands around her warm cup. "So you wanted to explain." "I'm listening." Alexander took a breath. "My mother died when I was 12. Cancer. She was a teacher, spent her whole life helping other people's children. When she got sick, she refused to stop working. Said those kids needed her." He stared into his coffee. The last few months she was in so much pain, but she still smiled at everyone. Still asked the nurses how their days were going. Still thanked them for every little thing they did. Rachel felt something tighten in her chest. The night she died, there was one nurse who stayed after her shift ended. She sat with my mother, held her hand, told her it was okay to rest. She didn't have to do that. It wasn't her job. But she did it anyway because she cared. Alexander looked up at Rachel. "After that night, I never saw her again. I was just a kid. I didn't even get her name. And you think I'm like her?" Rachel asked quietly. "No, I think you are her. Not literally, obviously. But when you treated my hand, you reminded me that people like her still exist. People who care about strangers. Who help because it's the right thing to do, not because there's something in it for them." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know how rare that is in my world, Rachel? Everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. But you just helped me and walked away. You didn't even know who I was." Rachel didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected him to be so honest, so vulnerable. "I built my company after my mother died," he continued. "Made billions. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what really mattered. I forgot about kindness. About people who work hard and never complain. About single mothers who bandage strangers' hands and then rush off to their second jobs." He met her eyes. "You reminded me, and I wanted to say thank you. That's all this is." Rachel blinked back unexpected tears. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just accept the help. Not as charity. Not as debt. Just as one human being trying to make another human being's life a little easier." They talked for 2 hours. Rachel told him about Sophie, about her ex-husband who left, about how hard it was to work 2 jobs and never see her daughter. Alexander told her about his company, about the pressure of running a billion-dollar business, about how lonely it was at the top. By the time Rachel left, something had shifted. She still wasn't comfortable with his help, but she understood it better, and more surprisingly, she actually enjoyed talking to him. He wasn't what she expected. He was kind and funny and surprisingly normal when he wasn't surrounded by security guards and expensive cars. As she drove home, Rachel realized something that terrified her. She wanted to see him again. Over the next 3 months, Rachel's life changed in ways she never expected. Alexander became part of her routine. He'd text her in the mornings asking how she slept. They'd meet for coffee on her days off. He even came to the diner once, sitting at the counter while she worked, ordering pie and leaving ridiculously large tips that she always tried to refuse. Sophie met him on a sunny Saturday afternoon at the park. Rachel had been nervous about it for days, but Alexander was natural with her daughter. He pushed Sophie on the swings, helped her across the monkey bars, and listened intently to her 5-year-old stories about her stuffed animals and her best friend at daycare. "He's nice." "Mommy," Sophie said that night as Rachel tucked her into bed, "is he your boyfriend?" Rachel's cheeks burned. "He's just a friend, sweetie. He looks at you funny." "Funny how?" Sophie scrunched up her face, thinking. "Like how I look at ice cream." Rachel laughed and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Go to sleep, silly girl." But Sophie's words stayed with her. Because the truth was, Alexander did look at her differently now. And if she was being honest with herself, she looked at him the same way. She was falling for him, which terrified her more than anything. Then everything fell apart on a Tuesday morning. Rachel was at the hospital, finishing her shift, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Rachel Torres. The voice was unfamiliar. Male. Cold. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Detective Brian Chen with Child Protective Services. We need you to come to our office immediately." It's regarding your daughter, Sophie. Rachel's blood turned to ice. What about Sophie? Is she okay? She's fine. She's here with us. But we've received some serious allegations regarding your fitness as a parent. We need to speak with you right away. The world tilted. Rachel barely remembered driving to the CPS office. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. Her mind raced through every possibility. Had something happened at daycare? Had she done something wrong? Sophie was healthy, happy, loved. What could this possibly be about? At the office, a stern-looking woman led her to a small room. Sophie sat in a chair, clutching her backpack, tears streaming down her face. Rachel rushed to her and pulled her into her arms. It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Everything's okay. I want to go home, Sophie sobbed. They came to my school. Everyone was looking at me. Rachel's heart shattered. She looked up at the woman. What is this about? Why did you take my daughter from school? Please sit down, Miss Torres. The woman's voice was flat, professional. We've received allegations from Sophie's father that you're an unfit parent. Rachel felt like she'd been punched. Her father? Her father abandoned us 5 years ago. He's never even met her. He has no rights. He's petitioning for full custody. He's provided evidence that you work excessive hours, leave Sophie with neighbors regularly, and are currently involved with a man of questionable character who has access to the child. Questionable character? What are you talking about? The woman slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos. Rachel and Alexander at the coffee shop. At the park with Sophie. Outside the diner. Someone had been following them, documenting everything. Your ex-husband claims you're using Sophie to trap a wealthy man, that you're exposing her to an unstable environment, that you're neglecting her basic needs in pursuit of this relationship. Rachel couldn't breathe. That's insane. Sophie is everything to me. I work hard to provide for her. And Alexander is a good man. He cares about both of us. Alexander Blackwell, the billionaire. The woman raised an eyebrow. Miss Torres, can you see how this looks? A struggling single mother suddenly dating one of the richest men in the country? Your ex-husband's concerns aren't entirely without merit. He doesn't have concerns. He doesn't even know her. Rachel's voice rose. Why would he suddenly care now? Where has he been for 5 years? That's something the court will need to determine. For now, we need to do a home evaluation. Sophie will stay in temporary care until... No. Rachel stood up, holding Sophie tighter. You're not taking my daughter. Ms. Torres, please sit down. If you don't cooperate, this will only make things worse. The next few hours were a nightmare. Rachel called a lawyer she couldn't afford. She answered endless questions about her work schedule, her living situation, her relationship with Alexander. They examined her bank statements, asked about the sudden payment of her debts, questioned whether she was being manipulated or coerced. Through it all, Sophie clung to her, crying. Rachel kept her voice calm for her daughter's sake, but inside she was screaming. Finally, they let her take Sophie home, but only temporarily. There would be a hearing in 2 weeks. Until then, someone from CPS would be monitoring them. Random home visits, interviews with neighbors. Everything about their life would be scrutinized. Rachel called Alexander that night after Sophie finally cried herself to sleep. She'd held it together all day, but the moment she heard his voice, she broke down. He came back. She sobbed into the phone. My ex, he's trying to take Sophie. He's using you against me. He's saying I'm a bad mother because I'm with you. Rachel, slow down. Tell me everything. She explained it all. The allegations, the photos, the hearing. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end. This is my fault, Alexander said quietly. I brought this into your life. No, don't say that. This is him. He's doing this, but why now? Why would he suddenly come back after 5 years? Alexander's voice turned hard. Something doesn't add up. Let me look into this. Alexander, no. You getting involved will only make it worse. They already think I'm using Sophie to trap you. If you start investigating, I'm not going to just stand by while someone tries to take your daughter away. His voice was firm. Trust me, please. Rachel wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Too scared. Okay, she whispered. Over the next week, Rachel lived in constant fear. Every time her phone rang, she jumped. Every knock on the door made her heart race. A social worker came twice to inspect their apartment, looking through their refrigerator, checking Sophie's bedroom, asking invasive questions. Sophie started having nightmares. She clung to Rachel constantly, afraid to go to school, terrified that the people would come take her away again. Rachel had to cut her hours at the diner to stay home more, which meant less money, which only added to her stress. Alexander tried to help, but Rachel pushed him away. Every time she saw him, she thought about those photos, about how her ex-husband was using their relationship to paint her as an unfit mother. It wasn't fair, but she couldn't risk it. "Maybe we should stop seeing each other," she told Alexander one night on the phone. "Just until this is over." Rachel, no. That's exactly what he wants. "But if it helps me keep Sophie, it won't, don't you see? This isn't really about me. This is about him trying to control you. If you give in now, he wins, and he'll keep finding ways to control you forever." Rachel knew he was right, but knowing it didn't make it any easier. The night before the hearing, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Sophie, watching her daughter's peaceful face in the moonlight. The thought of losing her was unbearable. She'd do anything to keep her safe. Anything. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "I found something. We need to talk before the hearing tomorrow. Trust me." Rachel stared at the message. Part of her wanted to ignore it. Whatever he'd found could make things worse. But another part of her, the part that was desperate and terrified, needed to know. She texted back. "Okay, meet me at the courthouse early. Before it starts. Tomorrow everything would change. For better or worse, this nightmare would finally have an answer." Rachel just prayed that answer wouldn't destroy her entire world. Rachel arrived at the courthouse an hour early. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd left Sophie with Mrs. Chen, who promised to keep her distracted with cartoons and cookies. The thought of her daughter's scared face that morning made Rachel's chest ache. Alexander was already waiting by the entrance, looking tired. Like he hadn't slept either. "Tell me what you found," Rachel said immediately. He pulled out a folder. "Your ex-husband, Daniel. He didn't just suddenly decide to come back. Someone paid him to file for custody." Rachel's stomach dropped. "What? Who would do that?" "My uncle, Gregory Blackwell." Alexander's jaw tightened. "He's been trying to push me out of the company for years. If I get married, have a family, his claim to succession disappears. He saw you as a threat. So he paid my ex to destroy my life?" Rachel felt sick. "He paid him $2 million. I have the bank records. Daniel doesn't even want Sophie. He's never asked to see her, never called to check on her. This is purely for money." Alexander handed her the folder. "There's more. Daniel's been arrested twice in the past 3 years. Once for fraud, once for assault. He owes money to some dangerous people. He took my uncle's deal because he's desperate." Rachel flipped through the documents, her vision blurring with angry tears. "How did you find all this?" "I have resources, and I used every single one of them." Alexander stepped closer. "Rachel, I'm sorry. This happened because of me, because my uncle saw that I care about you and Sophie. But I'm going to fix it." "How?" "Even if we show this to the judge, it doesn't change the fact that I work 2 jobs, that I leave Sophie with neighbors, that everything Daniel said about my life is technically true. None of that makes you a bad mother. You're the best mother. You sacrifice everything for her." Alexander took her hand. "Trust me, please, one more time." Before Rachel could respond, her lawyer arrived. A kind woman named Patricia who'd agreed to take her case at a reduced rate. She looked at the documents Alexander provided, her eyes widening. "This changes everything," Patricia said. "If we can prove this custody suit is fraudulent, we can get it dismissed." They walked into the courtroom together. Daniel was already there with his expensive lawyers. Rachel's breath caught when she saw him. He looked older, harder. His eyes were cold when they met hers. There was no love there, no regret, just calculation. The hearing began. Daniel's lawyer painted Rachel as a neglectful mother who chased wealthy men and used her daughter as leverage. They showed the photos of her with Alexander. They brought up her work schedule, her small apartment, her financial struggles before Alexander came into her life. Rachel sat there, listening to them twist her entire existence into something ugly. Every choice she'd made to survive, to provide for Sophie, was being used against her. She wanted to scream, to defend herself. But Patricia had told her to stay quiet and let her do the talking. When it was their turn, Patricia stood up calmly. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that this custody suit is fraudulent." Daniel's lawyer objected immediately, but the judge allowed it. Patricia laid out everything. The bank transfer from Gregory Blackwell to Daniel. The arrest records. The fact that Daniel had never once tried to contact Sophie in 5 years. That he hadn't paid a single dollar in child support. Mr. Torres isn't here because he wants his daughter, Patricia said firmly. He's here because he was paid to disrupt Miss Torres's life. This is a scheme orchestrated by Gregory Blackwell to sabotage his nephew's personal life for business reasons. The courtroom erupted. Daniel's lawyers demanded proof of these accusations. The judge called for order. Rachel sat frozen, watching it all unfold like a movie. Then Alexander stood up. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The judge looked surprised but nodded. "Mr. Blackwell, this is highly irregular, but go ahead." Alexander walked to the front of the courtroom. "I want to make something clear. Rachel Torres is the most honest, hardworking person I've ever met. She didn't know who I was when we met. She didn't want my money. She still doesn't. She turned down every offer of help I made because she wanted to stand on her own 2 feet. His voice was strong, steady. She works 2 jobs to provide for her daughter. She put Sophie first in every decision. The only reason we're here today is because my uncle saw that I was falling in love with her, and he wanted to stop it." Rachel's heart stopped. He'd said it. In front of everyone. Falling in love. "I have security footage of my uncle meeting with Daniel Torres 3 weeks ago," Alexander continued. "I have recorded phone calls. I have everything you need to prove this is a setup, and I'm willing to testify against my own uncle if it means protecting this family." The judge looked at Daniel. "Mr. Torres, do you have anything to say?" Daniel's face had gone pale. His lawyers were whispering frantically to each other. Finally, Daniel stood up. "I'd like to withdraw my petition for custody." Just like that. It was over. The judge dismissed the case. Daniel and his lawyers rushed out of the courtroom without another word. Rachel sat there unable to move, unable to believe it was really finished. Patricia squeezed her shoulder. "You won. Sophie's staying with you." Rachel burst into tears. Not sad tears, relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. Alexander helped her up and she collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. He held her tight, not saying anything. Just being there. Outside the courthouse, Rachel finally pulled herself together. "You said you were falling in love with me, in there." "In front of everyone," Alexander smiled. "I did, because it's true. I've been falling for you since the moment you bandaged my hand and then ran off to your second job without asking for anything in return. I have a 5-year-old daughter. I work at a diner. I live in a tiny apartment. I'm not anyone special. You're everything special." He took both her hands. "Rachel, I don't want to pressure you. I know this has been overwhelming. But I need you to know something. I'm not going anywhere. Whether you want me in your life or not, I'm going to make sure you and Sophie are protected. My uncle is being removed from the company as we speak. He'll never bother you again." Rachel looked up at him, at this man who'd turned her world upside down in the best and worst ways. "I'm scared. Of all of this. Of how fast everything's moving. Of what it means." "I'm scared too," Alexander admitted. "I've never felt this way about anyone. But I think that means it's real. Sophie really likes you. She asked if you were my boyfriend. Smart kid. What did you tell her?" Rachel smiled through her tears. "I told her you were just a friend. But I think I was lying to both of us. So what now? Now I go pick up my daughter and tell her she's safe. That nobody's taking her away. And then maybe if you're free, you could come over for dinner. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti and a 5-year-old who talks through the entire meal." Alexander's face lit up. "I can't think of anything I'd rather do." 6 months later, Rachel's neighborhood witnessed another spectacle. The black cars returned, but this time they were decorated with white ribbons and flowers. Alexander had asked Rachel to marry him on a quiet Tuesday evening, while they were helping Sophie with her homework. No fancy restaurant. No dramatic gesture. Just a simple question in their kitchen with Sophie as a witness. Rachel said yes. Not because of the money or the lifestyle, but because somewhere between bandaging his hand and fighting for her daughter, she'd fallen completely in love with him too. The wedding was small, just close friends and family. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. Sophie was the flower girl, taking her job very seriously, making sure every petal was perfectly placed. Rachel kept working as a nurse, though she cut down to part-time. Not because she had to, but because it gave her purpose, because helping people still mattered to her. Alexander understood that. He never asked her to change who she was. They moved into a bigger house, but not a mansion. Sophie got her own room, painted purple with stars on the ceiling. They adopted a dog, a scruffy rescue that Sophie named Pancakes. Life wasn't perfect. They argued sometimes. Rachel still struggled with accepting help. Alexander still worked too much. But they figured it out together, day by day. On their first anniversary, Alexander showed Rachel something. A new foundation he'd created in his mother's name. It provided support for single parents working multiple jobs, helping them afford childcare and education and basic necessities. "You inspired this," he told her. "You reminded me what really matters. Not the money or the business. The people. The ones who work hard and never complain. The ones who bandage strangers' hands and ask for nothing in return." Rachel looked at the foundation paperwork, tears in her eyes. This was his way of honoring her, of honoring every single parent who struggled like she had. That night, as they tucked Sophie into bed, their daughter looked up at them sleepily. "Are you happy, Mommy?" Rachel looked at Alexander, then back at her daughter. "Yes, baby. I'm very happy." And for the first time in a very long time, it was completely true.